Check Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to Chamber Chats, coming to you as always from the podcasting studios here at the Czech Media Group, one of our chamber champions. I'd like to acknowledge, as I always do, that I live and work and we are currently operating in the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, known to us as the Songhees and the Esquimalt or Kosapsum people, who have been the stewards of this land for millennia. And Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who are redefining what banking can do for people, for community, and for the world. We are doing a series of interviews and conversations with some of our regional mayors. And as we know, each of our 13 municipalities has its own sort of distinct culture, its own distinct spirit and what it means and how it operates. Today, we're going to talk to the mayor of the district of Oak Bay, Mayor Kevin Murdoch. Welcome back to Chamber Chats. How are you?
I'm great, Bruce. Thank you very much for having me.
So you're in term 2. You're a councillor, and then you ran for mayor. Now you're in your second term as mayor. So give me a little comparison about first term compared to this term.
It's a great term. We have a really good council and a good staffing contingent here, so that makes my life much easier. Last term was definitely dominated by COVID. I think that was sort of the big surprise that hit us all, and so that dominated everything. Even once we came out the other side of it, there were still just ramifications that carried on. This term mostly seems to be dominated by provincial initiatives, directives, particularly around housing, that are sort of causing us to readjust and scramble a little bit to meet those priorities. But other than that, there's actually a lot of consistency between the last council and this one in terms of our priorities. We're still looking at infrastructure replacement, fiscal management, housing, active transportation, building our relationships with our First Nations partners in the region, and of course a number of specific projects like Oak Bay Marina, which we were unable to do last term, so they're still on our books for this term.
Yeah, it's so many times we have conversations now that still sort of relate to COVID recovery and the places we are in our economy and in our operations. Things will have changed in the way that Oak Bay does business, whether it's work from home, whether it's just protocols around that. How did COVID change what you do?
Well, it had some positive impacts. I think it made our workforce more understanding of the need to be nimble and change. I think that's not always a strength of municipal government. So, we've had to move things electronically. We've had to change the way we do business. But I think, generally speaking, I find people's sort of tempers got shorter and we're sort of, generally grumpier. We seem to be getting past that now, but there's still aspects of that. I think all governments seem to have had a little bit of erosion of trust, and so because people weren't able to sort of meet with us in person and have those little conversations that let you sort of talk about things, and so that's our job, is to earn that trust, and so but certainly being able to talk to people one-on-one is a big asset.
Yeah, we found too that a lot of people think that higher levels of government and that disrespect and that angry stuff kind of filters down to lower levels too, but that's just kind of a sign of the time. And social media is a part of that too. So speaking of all that stuff, when you as the mayor of Oak Bay open up your email every day, or you take a look at your voicemails, or you open up snail mail, what's the number one reason people contact you as the mayor?
Well, it really changes, month to month. I'd see, in this, it's in the summertime, it might be asking about events or something else. In the wintertime, probably potholes or things of that nature. We work very hard to make sure that people actually do know how to report things, because our staff are faster at fixing potholes than I am, I'll say that. But overall, I would say, it's a positive input. Like, people are living in the community, they see something that could be better, and they're talking to me about it. So sometimes that's opportunities for housing, sometimes it's changes to our Parks and Rec and Culture programming or facilities, or it's overwhelmingly people looking at the community that they love and looking at ways of making it better. So I really can't complain too much about the contacts I have with the public.
Last time you and I spoke, we, pardon the pun, went down the road about infrastructure improvements that are coming along.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a major disruption in Oak Bay in the next number of years. So let's talk a little bit about why now is the time to do that and what has to happen.
Yeah, so we've been putting money aside for the last 5 years pretty intensely. So their taxes have gone up every year, socking away sort of to ramp up our funding to be able to fully fund all of our infrastructure replacement in perpetuity. So this is sort of the baseline required to, if we have a 100-year lifespan of all of our assets, to put 1% away every year is essentially how that math works. That's very crude, but that's sort of the understanding. So we've now got a team to manage those because big projects require a team to manage them. So we're going from a couple million a year to more like 20 or 25 million a year in capital projects. This is the first, last year was about 13 million. This year will be closer to 20, 22 million. So we're ramping up quite quickly. The big project this year for us is the Uplands, the first stage of the Upland sewage separation, but also includes a lot of water main replacements and other, street light replacements and things of that nature. So we've got 8 different water main replacements going on 8 different roads. We've got 3 roads that are doing complete sewer replacements this year, 2 with storm sewer. And then we have 3 different corridors that are undertaking significant active transportation upgrades as well. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of work happening. And so part of our planning of that is to make sure that we have a really, really robust communications plan so that people know when the project is coming up, when it's coming up, and then what the impacts will be on them, because we know it's going to be quite disruptive.
So when you're doing that kind of work, it's the tearing up of the streets and the sidewalks and all that's going to show up in your mail and your voicemails, I bet, doesn't it, when that's happening?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, it's really on us to make sure that people are, even if you tell them 10 times, they're still going to wake up the morning of and they're going to be surprised to see the road dug up. So, but we have to do our best to communicate that.
So when we're talking about the kind of things that these different streets and roads are under construction, that's disruptive, but it's necessary. It's got to be done. But as you look at this plan over the next 10 years and you're going to start investing all this money, is it pretty much every corner of Oak Bay that's going to be impacted by this at some point, or are some a little newer than the other infrastructures?
No, it's pretty much every corner of Oak Bay is going to be impacted by this. It may seem a little surprising because obviously the southern part of Oak Bay was built out pre-1940 and the north half was built out between 1940 post-war to 1960, 62. So you think that would be in better shape, but in fact the materials that they use is degrading faster than the old pipes are. So really the whole municipality has different stages. We've done a very thorough review of all of the pipes. We've put scanning tools through them, so we have a good sense of their condition, and we're prioritizing based on their likelihood of failure.
Something that happens in conversations every day, in every town, in every home, in every media outlet is the H word. That's housing. We're going to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Kevin Murdoch. He's the mayor of the district of Oak Bay. So Oak Bay has something called the Housing Action Plan. So you guys you're all kind of discussing what's going to happen. You have a plan. So tell me about the plan.
Yeah, the Housing Action Plan it's a bunch of different tools. So we were currently undertaking 2 major projects. One was our infill plan process, and the other was a village area planning. So that was sort of infill, which is sort of currently single family, looking at what the province is now talking about, but everything from townhouses down to duplexes, and the village planning, which is more of the higher density, so the multifamily housing. Those are still going ahead. We had to stop actually our infill and pivot now to what the province wants to do. So that's really taking up the majority of our staff time and planning for the bulk of this year, and also involves some things like changes to our OCP to align. So we're looking at our village area planning corridor planning happening sometime probably in starting in 2025, so next year. But cumulatively, we have a couple of drivers for that. Well, actually, a number of drivers: changing demographics, aging community, as well as need for like workforce housing and other aspects, as well as a real underinvestment in affordable housing, subsidized housing that we haven't provided a lot of in Oak Bay just because there isn't a lot of public land. So we're looking at projects for that. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We have provincially mandated housing targets as well, but those are somewhat irrelevant. We're with a required, even just with the baseline of the provincial requirements, our housing requirements are in the neighborhood of 660 new units, and as of June of this year, we're required to pre-zone for an additional 20,000 units on the existing lot. So I think, proportionally, we're way above the expectations on that. although I do understand some of that's going to be hard to develop, just costs being what they are these days.
Yeah. Do you see any increase in businesses or more demand for business licenses in Oak Bay, or is that just kind of not who you are, really?
Not an increase, but we've had a very steady state on our business licenses and our businesses as a whole. I'll say our Business Improvement Association in our main village and all the business owners in the in the district do a really good job of being attractive, drawing people into their various villages. Everything from little corner commercial to our smaller villages like Estevan and Cadbrew Bay Road, and then of course our main village on Oak Bay Avenue. Yeah, so there's a lot of work goes into making those vibrant. We do need to do our village area planning though, because what we were finding is just things like sidewalks are too narrow. The advent of street side patios and things like that. We need to start designing that for that, as well as things like active transportation on those corridors as well. So. They're lovely in part because all the infrastructure is underground, but all the infrastructure being underground also means that we can't afford to change it more than once. So we have to have a master plan, and then we can start doing that work, because we're going to have to shift all of the underground conduits and everything at the same time as we're doing the above ground work.
Yeah. Speaking of those neighbors, just Estevan Village. I just want to go there for a second. The little fish and chip place in Estevan Village.
Yes.
Amanda and I ride our bikes from View Royal to go to that place to have fish and chips. It's so cool. And then walk the village. It's a lovely area. So you referred in that last part about the OCP, the official community plan. Yours was last updated in, I want to say, 2020 or 2021.
Last meaningful update was really in 2014. That was really the last time it was substantively changed, and it's had minor updates since then. So it's due for another update. Again, we are required to prioritize based on provincial requirements at this point. So we're undertaking the necessary changes to align the OCP with the new housing forms. But we'll see a more substantive look that'll look more at, again, the corridors, UVic, and some of the commercial centers coming up probably in 2025.
Yeah, UVic has some expansion plans, including housing, coming up right now. Do you, and part of UVic's footprint is in Oak Bay. Do you see any significant pushback from residents about that?
Well, there's always some consternation of change that happens pretty naturally on everything. The area at UVic that we're looking at for housing is a little bit different than what they're doing right now. Right now, they're building out a lot of student housing, which is on the Saanich side of the campus. That has different requirements. We're looking at what used to be called the dog park, because people used to walk their dogs there, now called Cedar Hill Corners. But it's a pretty substantial piece of property, about 35 acres, that could look at a pretty substantial comprehensive development on that site. A problem we have right now is just that UVic doesn't have the in-house capacity to lead a project like that. We can't lead the project; it's got to be driven by the applicant. But even if they did put it forward, we'd probably need some support just to manage a project of that size, being a small community. So. We've been talking with the province to see if they can come up with some sort of innovative models that might fund a development plan for that area. I think it would be hugely beneficial. It could do a lot more in terms of providing meaningful housing and potentially put in some commercial space as well for an area that's quite underserviced. Talking like little restaurants, cafes, and maybe a corner store or something like that. And it can be linked right into the UVic community. It's easy to forget sometimes, but there's 18,000 people in Oak Bay, and there's 25,000 people in UVic between students and staff. So it's helpful to us to have additional housing options. So we're talking about for staff, for grad students, and for the general community to live in, to kind of build a bit more of a community link there. That's kind of been the conversation to this point.
Yeah, you talk about the other side of the UVic campus, the Ian Stewart complex, which is at Gordon Head and Mackenzie.
That's right. So we're at the opposite end of that.
Yeah, and that's going to be a huge development they do at Ian Stewart. Something we always are going to go on record as saying is the Chamber are advocating very loudly for more on-campus housing, simply because that would free up a lot of those rental units for workforce housing, and that solves part of our housing problem that we have right now. Something else that's an issue across the region, and one part of it in particular, not Oak Bay, but that's public safety. We want to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Kevin Murdoch, who is the mayor of the District of Oak Bay. All kinds of stuff. Public safety is a factor in every municipality across Canada, if not North America and other parts of the world. Is that a factor in Oak Bay? I mean, there's always some degree of public safety concerns, but tell me what that's like in Oak Bay right now.
Yeah, it is obviously a significant issue. I think that it's about a 25% of our budget is policing, but community safety is a lot more than that. So obviously, it requires partnerships with the province in particular, who provide a lot of the services that help sort of mitigate some of the problems we're seeing on the streets. Oak Bay's, quite lucky for a couple of reasons. We don't have, a large visible homeless population. We do have a homeless population. But I think we're really also really lucky that the last 10 or 15 years, we've had incredible leadership at our Oak Bay Police Department. We are one of only 14 municipal police departments in BC. And it's allowed us to really build a culture of community policing, a kind of policing I think that's been undervalued writ large across the country over the years. And I always think of community policing being kind of like the family practice doctor, kind of underappreciated over the years. But so fundamental, right? The job of the police is to be visible, be approachable, do the small things right, earn the trust of the community. And then when things happen or things are developing, ideally you're getting contacted really early through a positive relationship with the businesses, with people, and with the most vulnerable. And because you're a trusted agent of help. And we've really built that in this community. We've really worked hard to be that to build those relationships. It's not easy, but we've treated community policing like a center of excellence that it deserves, like a specialization unto itself. And I think we're really seeing the benefits of that now. Where there's some really positive aspects of our police's relationship with our community.
Yeah, I was going to say parking enforcement, but as I recalled, I don't believe there's any paid parking in Oak Bay, is there?
We do have commissionaires, and they do enforce parking, but we don't have paid parking. It's just maintenance of 2-hour parking
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah.
And you have a new police chief.
We have a great new police chief, or will, as of June 1st. Our current Deputy Chief Constable, Julie Channon, is going to be stepping into the chief role. She's been fantastic as a deputy chief. Our current chief is retiring at the end of May. He's done an amazing job. Mark Fisher, he's actually been our police chief twice. But again, both Mark and Julie have been unbelievable advocates for community policing and have done fantastic work on developing the team there. So yeah, we're currently underway for looking for a new deputy chief constable.
I'm going to loop back to housing for a second. I apologize. I forgot to ask you this earlier, but has the short-term rental regulation thing, is that imposition impacted a lot of people in Oak Bay?
Not particularly. It's interesting. We've actually had a ban on short-term rentals in Oak Bay. Not that stopped people from having them, but the provincial rules are different in the sense that they're getting a database that is easy to use to know what's out there, and their penalties are quite stiff and severe. So I think it'll probably change the behavior, but it hasn't been a really substantive problem. In fact, we've even built into any multifamily that's been built in the last 15 years or so has had direct covenants on it that A, require all units to be able to be rented, but B, have prohibited short-term rentals.
You also have something called, I want to get it right here, the Age-Friendly Action Plan. That sounds kind of cool. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's just sort of a guiding document. It's there to kind of make sure that as we're planning that our approach to housing and transportation and recreation, takes into account the changing demographics. Really, as people are aging, making sure that those things are accounted for, and that what they call active aging is encouraged. So making sure that we're providing supports that make it possible for people to bike and walk and use our facilities in a way that keeps them active through their later years.
You had mentioned earlier the Oak Bay Marina, too, that there was some stuff going on there. The restaurant is closed, and you actually own that land, and the Oak Bay Marine Group leases it from the district, as I understand. What's the plan for all of that? Where's that at?
So we're still in development. We're doing some financial analysis work and to really carrying capacity of the land so we can have some financial modeling. And we're speaking with our First Nations partners as well to look at their interest and involvement in that. I know they certainly have a cultural connection there, but there may be some larger partnership that might be viable. I don't know the exact process that's going to come out of that. It'll likely be another sort of RFP process because obviously we can't build anything on that site ourselves. So we'll be looking for partners, but the nature of that partnership is yet to be determined.
Something else that Oak Bay is kind of known for is the odd landmark here and there. There's Todd House, the Oak Bay Marina, like I mentioned before. The Chinese Cemetery is a pretty cool site as well. But there's also, I believe it's within the Oak Bay Marina plan, the Takaya project. Takaya was the wolf that used to live on the island and swim. Tell me about Takaya.
Yeah, it's so we actually refer to it as Takaya because that's really the
Mm.
Lekwanga name for wolf, and that was the so. If you go down to Cattle Point now in Uplands Park, there is a large granite sculpture carved by a gentleman named Kent Laforme, fantastic artist. It was actually commissioned and donated to the municipality, but it took us quite some time to get it in place. He Mr. Laforme started the project, reached out to Songhees to understand he didn't want to represent their stories inappropriately, and they really embraced him taking on that project. They took him out to the islands, Chatham and Discovery Islands, where the wolf was, and spent time walking the trails with him and talking about their connection to those lands and how they live there, and so he took all of that and created the sculpture that's down at Cattle Point right now, and it looks as it's got a portal in this large piece of artwork that looks out towards the islands. So it's quite a powerful piece, and the rock itself is really interesting, and in that it came from the same part of the island that the wolf came from on the west coast. So it was a giant piece of marble in the attic that was left and found, and so it made the same journey as the wolf did to get down here, be carved, and be a placeholder on there. So it's a really lovely piece of art, and not that you need another reason to go to Uplands Park. It's an amazing place just to go for a walk, but it's it's become a huge draw.
The day we're recording this is April 17th, by the way, and it would appear that Emerson the seal has come back to Oak Bay after having been relocated a couple of times. So a reminder, if that's still a thing right now, don't go near the seal, don't bother the seal. But that's been an interesting distraction for locals, I would think.
Yeah, you know what? We're so blessed here to just the closeness of nature is remarkable. I know we complain about deer a lot because there's a lot of them, but we have river otters and mink and seals and sea lions and orcas and gray whales and things seen all the time around here. And just the fact that because of the way that elephant seals molt at this time of life and they come ashore and they just sit there for hours and hours and hours, sometimes days. It's quite an attraction for people to come. But yes, absolutely, please don't disturb the seal. It needs its peace and quiet to undertake its molting process. And you want to stay friends with it. It's about 500 pounds right now, but they grow to about 4,500 pounds when they're fully grown. So keep your distance.
Yeah, and they bite. Didn't want to bring up the deer.
Bite.
Didn't want to bring up the deer, so we're going to leave that. Thank you for being with us, Mayor. Kevin Murdoch is the mayor of Oak Bay. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. And we'll see you again for another Chamber Chats.